Dear students, hope you are doing well. It is true that we have been facing a very critical time. We have to stay alert, and I tell you to stay home, to stay safe. But remember, days are also passing away. So you have to keep in touch with your books, because already we have lost a valuable amount of time. As for honors students, it is quite important that you try to read some lines or some pages or at least a book every day, so that you keep in touch with your educational materials. Today I'm going to take a class with you, honors first year students. Sorry that I could not contact you so far, but as per the directives of our department authorities, we have started online classes, both recorded and Zoom sessions with you. These things will be available very soon. Today I have decided to take a very small or short period class with you on The Garden Party by Katherine Mansfield. So hope you are all hale and hearty, trying to cope up with the situations as far as possible. You must of course listen to your elders and follow their guidelines. However, so I welcome again all of you to my online class. I am Ajay Maitra, Associate Professor, Department of English, Kustia Government Mahila College. And once again, I tell you, we must follow the slogan that we must stay home to stay safe. In your introduction to prose syllabus or prose course, that is fiction and non-fiction course, which is the course code number is 211107, you have a short story by Katherine Mansfield, The Garden Party. This is a very widely known short story, and Katherine Mansfield is a widely known short story writer. And before going to any discussion about the story and the author, let us listen to some extent. The text, see the text and listen to the audio version of the story.
The Garden Party by Katherine Mansfield. And after all, the weather was ideal. They could not have had a more perfect day for a garden party if they had ordered it. Windless, warm, the sky without a cloud. Only the blue was veiled with a haze of light gold, as it is sometimes in early summer. The gardener had been up since dawn, mowing the lawns and sweeping them, until the grass and the dark flat rosettes, where the daisy plants had been, seemed to shine. As for the roses, you could not help feeling they understood that roses are the only flowers that impress people at garden parties, the only flowers that everybody is certain of knowing. Hundreds, yes, literally hundreds, had come out in a single night. The green bushes bowed down as though they had been visited by archangels. Breakfast was not yet over before the men came to put up the marquee. "Where do you want the marquee put, Mother?" "My dear child, it's no use asking me. I'm determined to leave everything to you children this year. Forget I'm your mother. Treat me as an honoured guest." But Meg could not possibly go and supervise the men. She had washed her hair before breakfast, and she sat drinking her coffee in a green turban with a dog.
Now, dear students, let's get back to the topic. So, you have already understood that It is a very interesting story about the garden party or about a garden party, and written in a very lucid language, which is why Katherine Mansfield is so popular among the short story writers in 20th century. To speak about Katherine Mansfield in a very simple manner, we must say Katherine Mansfield is the central figure in the development of the modern short story. She was an early practitioner of stream of consciousness narration. You might have heard this term, stream of consciousness, which is a very common term or almost a buzzword in modern literature, which tries to detail the psychological perspective of a particular person, the inner consciousness, the inner workings, mental workings of a person. However, we must try to detail it later. She applied this technique to create stories based on the illumination of character rather than the contrivances of plot. That means Katherine Mansfield tried not to focus much on the organizing of plots, rather she tried to unfold the inner being of a character, focus light, shed light on a particular character. Her works consider such as universal concerns as family and love relationships and the everyday experiences of childhood, and are noted for their distinctive wit. Wit means intelligence, psychological sharpness and perceptive characterizations. Mansfield is one of the few authors to attain prominence. That means she became very prominent exclusively for short stories, and her works remain among the most widely read in world literature. I have got a few quotes from many of her writings, or some of her writings, here for you to understand some lines which have become almost proverbial from her writing. Everything in life that we really accept undergoes a change. So suffering must become love. This is the mystery. This is what I must do. For the opinions of others, for those voices, do the hardest thing on earth for you. Act for yourself. Face the truth. I want, by understanding myself, to understand others. I want to be all that I am capable of becoming. Now, dear students, you see a picture of Katherine Mansfield here. She was quite a fair lady, and you will come to know that her life was also very, what should I say, very, what should I say, full of events, yes, eventful life. She had a very eventful life. And look, if we go through very quickly at a glance, see at a glance some of the information about her life. Here we see her birth name was Katherine Mansfield Beauchamp. Her married name was Kathleen Mansfield Murray, because she married Middleton Murray at one stage of her life. Pseudonym, you must have heard the word pseudonym, under the name of which a writer writes Katherine Mansfield. Her date of birth is October 14, 1888, quite early, almost at the beginning of 20th century. Place of birth is Wellington, New Zealand. That means she came of a New Zealand family. And her death is January 9, 1923. Her place of death is Fontainebleau, France. Cause of death is tuberculosis. This is quite important. She died of tuberculosis. Then we see that her father was Harold Beauchamp, mother was Annie Burnell Beauchamp. She had 4 sisters and 1 brother. And all about spouse, we see that she first marries George Bowden, then she married John Middleton, and she had a partner, Ida, Constance Baker. This might sound a bit unusual because she had a very bohemian life, as you come to know from her biography. She had a child, one stillborn daughter. Alma mater. You might have heard the word alma mater means the places or the institutions from where you take your major courses or your education. That is Wellington Girls' College and Queen's College. She was really known for her short stories with themes relating to women's lives and social hierarchies, as well as her sense of wit and characterizations. She is often criticized for her bohemian lifestyle and libertinism, which entailed affairs with many men and 2 women. However, Katherine Mansfield was influenced by Anton Chekhov. If you have heard the name Anton Chekhov, you will readily understand. Anton Chekhov is a great short story writer of 20th century, and George Gurdjieff and Beatrice Hastings. Mansfield's works also inspired some writers like Christopher Isherwood and Aldous Huxley, a very important prose writer. Some notable works include In a German Pension, Prelude, Bliss and Other Stories, The Garden Party and Other Stories, The Dove's Nest, Something Childish. These are the names of her great works, and you must understand that in all these stories we commonly find the themes like the growth and self-consciousness of the female. So throughout her writing she tried to show the growth of a female personality and the self-consciousness, the relation between men and women. She highly focused on this issue, complexity of human emotion, children's innocence, repressed sexuality, bisexuality, and disappointment. One of the major themes of 20th century is disappointment, gender roles, the cruelty of the reality, and finally death. And you will come to know that even in Garden Party, you have many of these themes included in the story, like death, the cruelty of the reality, disappointment, whatever. Now, let us proceed to the next case. So, I have tried to gather or accumulate some information about Katherine Mansfield that might come to you as a bit unusual or unknown. Katherine Mansfield was the 3rd of the 5 children born to a financier and the chairman of the Bank of New Zealand. She first published her stories in the Wellington Girls' High School magazine and the High School Reporter. Her short story Prelude was published by Wool's Hogarth Press as a book in 1918. Only 3 collections of her stories are published during her lifetime. I have jotted down some information that might come as very important for you, like when Mansfield settled in the United Kingdom, she became a friend of modernist writers such as D.H. Lawrence and Virginia Woolf. You have heard the name of D.H. Lawrence and Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf is a very famous woman writer. Mansfield is thought to have contracted tuberculosis from D.H. Lawrence. That is a very interesting information, and she died of tuberculosis later. Apart from her literary career, Mansfield is widely remembered for her promiscuous relationships with both men and women. Well, at the age of 19, she fell in love with Garnet Troyer, a young violinist. When the affair collapsed, she rashly married C.C. Bowden, a singing teacher, and then abandoned him the day after the wedding to live with Ida Baker. She resumed her relationship with Garnet, became pregnant, and eventually had a stillborn child. Well, students, you will try to read more information about her life and works, but this information will I think help you a bit to understand her personality as a writer. Now, before we go for any discussion on her short story The Garden Party or about the writer, let us take some information about what a short story is. We see that a short story is a piece of prose fiction that typically can be read in one sitting and focuses on a self-contained incident or series of linked incidents with the intent of evoking a single effect or mood. A short story is a short work of fiction Fiction, as you know, is prose writing about imagined events and characters. Prose writing differs from poetry in that it does not depend on verses, meters or rhymes for its organization and presentation. Novels are another example of fictional prose and are much longer than short stories. Some short stories, however, can be quite long. This is a very important thing to know, because you will come to know that the Garden Party is not as short a short story as you know. Short stories are a bit long. If a short story is a long one, say 50 to 100 pages, we call it a novella, but Garden Party doesn't belong to the category of novella. Well, to sum up some of the characteristics of a short story, you can say that a short story should create a single impression, of course. The whole situation, the whole plot, the whole setting must revolve around one particular impression. As we find in the Garden Party, that the whole situation is all about Laura's experience of a particular event in her neighborhood. It should be highly economical with every word. Yes, you do not have much space for a short story to write things in very detail. All characters, dialogue and description designed to develop single pre-designed effect. Most short stories revolve around a single incident, character or period of time, should be capable of being read at one sitting. Opening sentence should initiate the predetermined or pre-designed effect. That is important. Students, you must know that most good stories ever written have nice beginnings. A good beginning actually attracts the attention of readers for a short story. Once climax reached, the story should end with minimum resolution. You know, in many writings, even after the climax, things come to an end very slowly with much detail. But that is for the satisfaction of the readers. In short stories, things sometimes end almost suddenly, leaving you at bay or at a state of loss. Yes. Should be capable of being read at one sitting. That is also very important. Opening sentence should initiate the predetermined or pre-designed effect. Once climax reached, the story should end with minimum resolution. Characters should only be developed to the extent required by the story. Well, dear students, try to focus here on this page. Here we have all the characters listed as we find in the story of the Garden Party. We have Laura Sheridan, Mrs. Sheridan's daughter, Laura, the central character, and the story's protagonist. Protagonist is a word you know, very important for every writing. The main character, you could say. Mrs. Sheridan, Mr. Sheridan's wife and mother of Laura, Laurie, Meg and Joe. She is in charge of the household and relinquishes charge of the Garden Party to Laura. That's in the story. Then you have Laurie Sheridan, the workers, Mr. Sheridan, Meg Sheridan, Joe Sheridan. Kitty Maitland is a friend of Laura and a party guest. Sadie, a female house servant. Hans, a male house servant. The florist, who delivers lilies ordered by Mrs. Sheridan. Cook, Godber's man, the delivery man who brings in the cream puff. Mr. Scott, a lower class neighbor who has just died. Look, Mr. Scott is a very important character in the story. Then you have Anne Scott and Anne's sister. Well, if we switch to the shortest summary of the story, then we have this here. The wealthy Sheridan family prepares to host a garden party. You understand? They are going to host a garden party. They have a big family. They have a big house. They have a big lawn where they are going to host a garden party. Laura is charged with instructing the workers. That means that her mother leaves the duty, the responsibility of guiding the workers to Laura. Laura is charged with instructing the workers on the placement of the marquee. Marquee is the tent. Her haughty air quickly disintegrates into an intimidating admiration for the working man. That means haughty, a bit arrogant, Laura was. And suddenly, as she watches the workmen doing their works, that haughty air a bit disintegrates into an intimidating admiration for the workmen. She finds responsibility. She finds good personality, even a kind of a close friendship, attitude of friendship among the working men with whom she feels a personal connection. Laura's mother, Mrs. Sheridan, has ordered masses of lilies to both their delight. You know, lily is a very beautiful flower. Laura's sisters Meg and Joes and their servant hands move furniture around to accommodate the piano. Joes tests the piano and then sings a song in case she asks to do so again later. After surveying the food in the kitchen, Laura and Joes learn that their working class neighbor, Mr. Scott, has died. This news comes suddenly, almost at the midway of the garden party arrangement, while Laura believes the party should be called off because a neighbor has died. You cannot have a party when you have a neighbor who has died just adjacent to your house, and you cannot celebrate lightly, as Laura believes it. Neither Joes nor their mother agrees. So this is a kind of a disagreement that follows. After catching herself in the mirror wearing a new hat, Laura eases her conscience by deciding to forget the matter until the party is over. So as everything has already been arranged, things are coming and everything has been set in order, Laura feels that she must try to forget the incident. But her conscience, her conscious mind can't exactly ignore that thing. When the evening comes and the family is sitting underneath the marquee, Mrs. Sheridan tells Laura to bring a basket full of leftovers to the Scott's house. Here Mrs. Sheridan tells Laura to take a basket full of leftover foods to the Scott's house. Laura is led into the poor neighbor's house by Mrs. Scott's sister. She sees the pitiable figure of the widow who has just lost her husband and is led to the late husband's corpse. There she goes to see the corpse, dead body of the husband. Here Laura is intrigued by the sublimity of the corpse's face. The death of the neighbor suddenly shakes her being and tries to ignite a sense of sublimity in her, and she finds his face in death just as beautiful as life as she knows it. That means death has a very calming effect on her. Having fled the house, Laura meets her brother Laurie at the corner of the lane. She finds herself unable to explain life and death concisely. She is a young girl, not yet mature enough to express her thoughts. And Laurie understands that his sister has come to realize her own mortality. That means the death leaves a painful realization of her own life and death. This is how she gains maturity and gains maturity over the realities of life. However, we will come to other discussions about the story in detail. Now, at a glance, let us have some understanding about the major issues that have been discussed here. The first issue that has been discussed in the story is class consciousness. That means, Laura belongs to an elite class, a sophisticated aristocratic class, having affluence, but the death incident happens to a family who belongs to a working class. And there you see, when the workmen arrive in the garden, Laura feels a certain sense of kinship with the workers, and again with the Scott family. An omniscient narrator. Omniscient narrators means a narrator who sees everything, who is almost everywhere there, and also explains that as children, Laura, Joes, Meg and Laurie were not allowed to go near the poor neighbor's dwellings, which spoiled their vista. Then you have illusion versus reality. Laura is, illusion. We are sometimes form illusions, a kind of a hyper reality. Yes, Laura is stuck in a world of high class housing, food, family and garden parties. She then discovers her neighbor from a lower class has died, and she clicks back to reality upon discovering death. Then you have sensitivity and insensitivity. That you understand, dear students. I am going a bit quick today, but you can download these things and try to understand by yourself, for yourself, slowly. Well, sensitivity, Laura is a very sensitive girl, but on the other hand, she has a family members who are quite insensitive to things around them. They only live in their own world of imaginations, and they have a typical sense of class distinction. Yes. The Sheridans hold their garden party as planned, complete, with a band playing music. Laura questions whether this will be appropriate, discovering the death of their neighbor only a few hours earlier. Then you have a very important theme in the story, death and life. The writer handles the theme of death and life in a short story. The realization of Laura that life is simply marvelous shows death of human beings in a positive light. Death and life coexist, and death seems to Laura merely a sound sleep far away from troubles in human life. So death raises in her a sense of realization about life also and the realities. This is how we can have a brief glance at the text, at the summary, at the major themes of the story. Now, students, I have this page for you to see the basic features of some characters. We know our protagonist is Laura Sheridan, so you must try to understand her character, of course, often seen as an autobiographical depiction of a young Mansfield. So, Laura has been taken as an autobiographical depiction of young Mansfield. Laura is described, Katherine Mansfield, she was a young girl, and we find herself here in the character of Laura. Laura is described as more sensitive and artistic than the rest of her family. That is important. This is do you remember the line that her mother tells her to not to disturb her, and Laura goes to the garden. This is demonstrated by her reaction to the news of Mr. Scott's death. While her other family members see no issue with the continuation of the garden party, Laura finds the festivities insensitive so close to the neighboring tragedy. However, Laura is distracted by the dazzling flowers of her new hat and is consequently enveloped back into the party atmosphere. That is almost the nature of a young girl, a girl of young age. She is again distracted. Later, Laura experiences a major epiphany. Do you remember the word epiphany I described to you while I was teaching Arabic in the class? Yes, epiphany, sudden realization. When visiting the Scott residence, as she is forced to contemplate the nature of death and humanity of the working class. Returning home, Laura struggles to put her epiphany into words. Then you have Mrs. Sheridan, a very looming character in the story. Though her presence is not much, but we understand her presence in another way because she is guiding everything. She represents the class, Laura's class, always a bit, if not obsessive, I must say dominating, yes, a bit dominating in the family. Mrs. Sheridan is the matriarch, matriarchal family, where mother is more important in the family and commanding figure of the Sheridan family. As the family sets up for the party, the readers get a sense of Mrs. Sheridan's overwhelming influence over everyone's actions. She is guiding almost everyone, telling them to do this or not to do that, something like that. Guests and family alike ask her opinion on every detail, from where flowers should be placed to what they should wear. When the family hears of the death, she expresses detached pity for her working class neighbors. This is how she belongs to the higher class authority. Yes. But she dismisses Laura's sympathetic response to cancel the party, stating, "People like that don't expect sacrifices from us." Well, you must read the later part. I go to Laurie Sheridan. Laurie is Laura's brother and the last character. Laura speaks to the conclusion of the story. Laura struggles to express her epiphany to Laurie, her realization. stating, "Isn't life?" To which Laurie replies, "Isn't it, darling?" Mansfield's ambiguity leaves readers wondering if Laurie understands what Laura is trying to express. This is, of course, the very nature of a short story. So, students, I have taken a few minutes to talk to you on this particular text, and I'll take more classes with a bit of details on this story in the next class, or if I can take more classes like this. So far today, until now, I thank you all, and I tell you once again to stay home, to stay safe, and of course keep in touch with your groups. At least follow the classes. You know, you have hundreds of materials streamed on the web or available online for your classes and understanding. You have your books as well. So, of course, you must tell your friends to visit the following official Facebook page for more honors classes. English Department KGMC. Many of you have already liked this page, I have seen. Try to include yourself or share the page more and more so that it becomes known among you. So that's all. Thank you. And you know, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts.